Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. And whenever you fast, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so as to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by your Father who sees in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consume, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. As we begin our reflection, not only for tonight, but for the coming season, our focus is peace, which may even seem absurd based on what we see in the world around us every day in the news and online and in our midst. As we start, I invite you to begin to embrace this idea, this concept, this condition that is peace. And let's think about it for a moment, and let's reflect openly with one another for just a moment about what this word means to us, what images it conjures for us in a word or two or phrase. What is peace to you? Calmness. We will repeat these so everyone can hear. What is peace to you? What does peace mean to you? Love. No war or fighting. No more arguing. That is peace. What? Happiness. Beautiful. An inward contentment. Harmony. Quietness. What else? Stillness. No fear. Joy. Connection. Serenity. Beautiful words. Conjuring words. They can bring us peace simply in their saying. Serenity. Harmony. Stillness.
The peace of God is the theme that we've chosen for this season of Lent. We actually were given this challenge because Pat Shields has written a book, or part of a book, called Peace Weaving, Jane Addams' Positive Peace and Public Administration. She sent us an email suggesting that she thought peace would make a really good sermon series, and we jumped on it. We loved that whole idea. So, peace and peace weaving. So whenever we do a sermon series, we try to think about the environment. And so, we decided that we needed to have our own olive grove. So these are olive trees. Now the olive branch, ancient Greek culture used it as a symbol of peace. The Romans would wave the olive branch when they wanted to work for peace instead of violence. And we know from Scripture that the olive branch is what the dove brought back to Noah after the dove went out and found that God had quit the war on the world with the flood, and that now there was land for them to go to. We actually got these olive trees. They're saplings, but they're olive trees. There's two different kinds up here, and Joyce Flockmeyer is the only one who knows what they were. She went with me, but if you are interested, we'll be able to help you to figure that out. So these saplings will grow into real big solid trees. But each night as we have people speak on peace, we hope that they'll be able to come out of the olive grove to preach. And you know, on the last night, on Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, we'll know also of the olive grove.
Peace is central to God's calling in Scripture, throughout the Hebrew Testament, throughout the Christian witness. And it's central not only to the Christian Scriptures and Hebrew Testament, but also to every sacred writing of every faith, tradition, and spirituality the world has known. Peace is a common denominator among people of all faiths. And I venture to say that people this day that claim no faith still place a central priority on peace. As we engage it in our own sacred writings, we encounter a couple of words. Peace is shalom in the Hebrew Testament. And we translate it as peace. It's actually a word with some mystical connection to it. And shalom might best be defined, might best be translated as everything ordered according to the way God wills. A world according to the goodness and loving intention of God. And the peace that comes from that. So peace is a condition or an observed quality of a world ordered according to God's will. When God creates, in the Hebrew creation stories, when God creates the heavens and the earth and everything therein, he looks on them and expresses his happiness, his delight with the creation. Everything is shalom, just as God intends. And this is echoed somewhat in the Christian Testament when we start to look at the Greek translation of the Old Testament and the Christian writings, all of which are in Greek. Eirene is the word that is used there that we translate as peace. And it has more of the Greek classical understanding of perfection, of forms, of beauty, of wholeness. But it has that same connotation that shalom does. The world at its best, people at their best, creation in its place of perfection. Shalom, Eirene, Salam. But in Jesus' time, there's another peace that exists. And it's a perversion of those words and everything that they mean. The pax, P-A-X, pax Romana, the pax, the peace of Rome, is everything ordered according to the will of the Caesar. Everything ordered according to the empire and its regime. Peace at the end of a sword.
Jesus had quite a bit to say about peace. One of the things he said was, "My peace I give to you." My peace, he says. There was something different about the kind of peace that Jesus gave. It was not as the world gives peace, but as he gives peace. So we don't have to have our hearts troubled or be fearful. He also says in Matthew, "Blessed be the peacemakers," not be those who sit in peace or those who know peace, but blessed be the peacemakers. And in fact, sometimes it's hard for us to understand what Jesus is saying, because he said, "Do not suppose that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." And if you take that out of context, it doesn't make sense for us. But when you see those verses in the whole story, you know that Jesus is talking about the message of the good news that will divide people. So much so that we know Jesus wasn't condoning violence, because he said later in Matthew to Peter, "Put your sword back in its place," after he's cut off the ear of the servant. "For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels?" Peace, Eirene, that Pastor Brad was talking about, is God's wholeness that we can know through Jesus.
Peace is threaded throughout the Hebrew Scriptures as well. And it's actually a fairly common thing for people to inquire about one another's well-being by asking them, how is your shalom? How is your peace? And it's an invitation to share. It's an invitation to reflect on, how is my peace? How is yours? How centered are you? How well do you feel in right relationship with other people, with the world around you, and with the God of your life? How is your shalom? And as much as we look for this peace, this wholeness of God in the world, the scriptures seem to be a litany of stories about places where peace is hard to find, not unlike the times we live in. And the prophets say, you will call for peace, peace, but there is no peace, at least in a world that is fought over and contested among the powers of humanity. But God's promise, in fact, God's proclamation for God's people in the Hebrew Scriptures is for shalom. I call upon you to live in peace, God says. And peace is a life ordered according to the Ten Commandments, ordered according to the teachings and wisdom of God, which enables us to be in that relationship with one another, with our world, and with God.
Sometimes we put peace and law together. It's Albert Einstein that said, peace is not merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice, of law, of order, in short, of government. But the peace that we are talking about is more like what Baruch Spinoza, the Dutch philosopher, said. Peace is not an absence of war. It is a virtue, a state of mind, a disposition for benevolence, confidence, justice. It is an unending source of strength in the midst of difficulties. It's about having restored relationship with God. It is a quiet goodness. It is to sit down in one's heart. It is a goodness of life that is not touched by what happens in the environment or outside or about circumstances. No. Peace is a virtue, a state of mind, a disposition.
Peace is active and kinetic. As much as we know our ability to make war, we need to find and discover our ability to make peace. And it is that intentional. It is an active, kinetic expression of that goodness. It is not a theory or an idea. It doesn't exist unless it is materially displayed and active in the world. So our contrast throughout this series is going to be the difference between allowing status quo and being intentional about making peace. And we're going to have a number of people that are going to come and talk to us about that.
And you know, Brett, it seems to me another important thing to say is that peace is not about giving up or about winning. It's so much more than that. Next Wednesday night, our very first speaker is going to be Pat Shields to come and talk a little bit about peace weaving, which is a fascinating understanding, and especially about some of the historical people that she has come to study and therefore I think know, who were peace weavers, people we can look up to and learn about.
And you invited Javier?
Javier Alanis is the director at the Lutheran Seminary program in the Southwest, where Brad and I both attended. He's going to come. He was the first Hispanic to get his PhD in the Lutheran, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. He is going to come and talk about liberation theology, about freedom, and how that fits with peace.
We've invited Michael Floyd, who is currently retired but active in a lot of different ways. We studied under him in biblical studies in seminary. He is a doctor of Old Testament theology. And he's going to talk about the Old Testament underpinnings of peace and how people were called upon and to varying degrees succeeded in achieving relative stability, times of peace in the midst of this turbulent history.
And he's returned from being a missionary or being
he was been a professor in El Salvador.
Okay.
at a school down there. So he's got some interesting perspective on the Central American state of affairs and peace or the lack thereof in some of those countries. We've invited Rabbi Alan Friedman to come and share about peacemaking from a Jewish perspective in contemporary context. There's a profound piece of Hebrew theology called Tikkun Olam. Want to try that one? Tikkun Olam. And it means the healing of the world. That the current mission, the contemporary mission of all of the people of Israel, all of the people of the tribe, is to be about, in their own way, in their own place, with what they have, the healing of the world, the Tikkun Olam, the restoration of the shalom of God.
And then I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a contemplative retreat center just behind the Randalls over here. It's called Eremos. Sometimes we advertise things about that for them, about different events they have coming up. There's a Roman Catholic sister there named Jean Springer, and she is just now getting ready to welcome some speakers about what's called spiritual activism. She is a spiritual director, and she joined us many evenings at Evensong and found those services to be peaceful for her. She is going to come and talk about peace and spiritual activism. We have a wonderful lineup of ministers of the gospel that are going to be coming and talking to us and with us on these Wednesday nights as we are about the peace of God.
The peace of God that passes all understanding is from Philippians 4. And there's a wonderful absurdity and yet promise in that language. As little as our world and even our own lives at times can appear peaceful, peace is a promise from God that if we will reach for it, we will find it. God proclaims peace among us. And so let's stand as you are able. And let's begin this journey of Lent together, hand in hand. The peace of the Lord be with you all.